Good afternoon, and welcome to the National Hispanic Council on Aging's virtual town hall, Election 2020. My name is Bob Blancato, and I'm a member of NHCOA's Board of Directors. And it's my pleasure to moderate today's virtual town hall focused on the 2020 election, which is one short week from today. Due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, the NHCOA is developing innovative ways to continue engaging, informing, and listening to communities. For 51 years, they have worked to improve the lives of Hispanic older adults, their families, and caregivers. This year is no different. 2020 has been fraught with many surprises and challenges, not limited to the COVID-19 global pandemic. We have ongoing climate change crisis, civil unrest, and more. And this year, we also face an election cycle that has further polarized our country. But voting is one way in which we, as everyday citizens, can voice our opinions on these important issues. Voting is both a right and a responsibility of every United States citizen. Your vote is your voice on issues such as housing, education, employment, handling of the pandemic, civil unrest, climate change, healthcare, etc. Many have already exercised their right to vote, and we thank you for that. In fact, we have already exceeded the total of early voting from 2016, and we still have a week to go before the election. But I want to point out an article that was run in the New York Times today, which has as its lead story, people who don't vote have as big an impact on elections as those who do. And they cited 3 examples. In the state of Arizona, in 2016, there were 2,135,000 individuals who were non-voters, and the margin of victory for President Trump was 91,000 votes. In Texas, there were 8,479,000 eligible non-voters, or people who didn't vote. The margin of victory for the president was 807,179. And in the state of New Mexico, there were 666,000 individuals who did not vote, and the margin of victory was 65,000 for Hillary Clinton. So this proves the point about the need to vote if you want to be responsible for a positive outcome. So to begin this virtual event, it is my pleasure to introduce the President and CEO of the National Hispanic Council on Aging, my dear friend, Dr. Yanira Cruz. Yanira is one of the nation's foremost advocates and spokespersons for diverse older adults and has been recognized for her commitment and leadership on behalf of diverse older adults nationwide. Welcome, Dr. Cruz.
Thank you, Bob, and hello, everyone. Welcome to today's town hall. And of course, first of all, thank you to the speakers for your time and for your expertise. We appreciate you, and we value your friendship, your partnership, and contributions to our society. I also want to say thank you to our board chair, Cindy Padilla, who will be making remarks shortly. And also thank you, of course, to our board member, Bob Blancato, for moderating and illuminating our conversation today. Thank you, Bob. We are at a crucial moment, 7 days away from the most important election of our lifetime. We know that elections have consequences. The next president of our nation will determine the future of our country, and in many ways, our destiny. There's a lot at stake. Our next president will determine important causes that influence our daily lives. He will determine how we respond to the COVID pandemic and if we are protected from the virus. He will determine what happens with Social Security, what happens with Medicare and Medicaid, and what we do about immigrant rights and social inequities. He will determine what type of health insurance we receive, and if our pre-existing conditions determine access to health care. We must elect a leader who will care about our well-being and who will protect our social programs that are so important to age well. Many Latino older adults depend on Social Security, and healthcare is a priority. So we must have a president who protects our health and our economic security. There's a lot of misinformation and outright alarmist notices that get amplified and exaggerations planted by extremist groups. Please look for trusted sources of information, organizations that provide balance and trusted news, like the National Hispanic Council on Aging and other organizations, AARP, is another example of good information. We Latinos should also get away from single issue politics. We must have a balanced approach to voting. I urge you to get informed about the candidates and vote. Take action. Get out there and vote. You cannot miss it. Lastly, stay safe, wear your mask, practice physical distancing, and wash your hands often. Remember, we are in the midst of a serious pandemic. And please share the information you gather from this conversation today with family and friends. Muchas gracias. Turn it over to you, Bob.
Thank you very much, Yanira. And let's welcome our next guest, who will provide a welcoming message before starting the panel. Mrs. Cindy Padilla, who is one of the United States' strongest community leaders and advocates, bringing 30 years of government experience to the National Hispanic Council on Aging. She has a background in community organization, environmental protection, and volunteer mobilization. Currently, Cindy is the chairwoman of our board of directors of National Hispanic Council on Aging. And Cindy, it's a pleasure to welcome you.
Good afternoon, Bob, and thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us as we discuss this so important topic. And thank you, Dr. Cruz, for your continued leadership with the National Hispanic Council on Aging. And many of you who know Dr. Cruz know that her work is tireless and unending, and her advocacy on behalf of older Hispanic adults is something that truly brought me to the National Hispanic Council on Aging and my work with her when I was at the Administration on Aging, or Administration for Community Living. And so, Dr. Cruz, thank you so much for your leadership. And Bob, thank you for joining us and moderating. And I know you're new to our board, but what you bring to us is, if you ever want to know the answer to any kind of a question in terms of political implications or what's going on, Bob is your go-to guy. So we're happy to have him on our board. I just wanted to say a couple of things in terms of welcoming you all today for the National Hispanic Council on Aging. And I think Dr. Cruz said it, is that this is one of the most important elections in our lifetimes. And I know we all come to this webinar today at different points in our lives, and so many of us have seen many elections, and some of us have seen maybe not so many, or have participated in not as many. But as we know that these elections are incredibly important for all of the reasons that Dr. Cruz had mentioned. And I want to just touch on one thing. Bob had said, that, we talk about voting, and sometimes people say, well, I'm just not going to vote. I mean, my vote doesn't matter. And, why should I? And, I don't really follow politics, and politics, doesn't really involve me. Well, politics does involve you. It involves us in everything that we do every single day. And I'm going to borrow a quote from Martin Luther King Jr., who said, our lives begin to end the day that we become silent about things that matter. And when we become silent about things that matter, our life starts to end, because we become disengaged in things that really do involve us and are important to us. And so I would just like to thank you all, because I know that voting is important for you. Otherwise, you would not be with us here today. And as Dr. Cruz said also, please pass on the information that you hear today, and talk it over with your family, with your friends, with the people that you see every day, and keeping those messages that voting is important, because our vote truly is our voice. And that's how we speak up about things that matter. So again, I just want to thank you and welcome you all to our Tele-Town hall. We have some great speakers. I'm looking forward to hearing all of them myself. And in closing, I would just like to say also is, like, when we do vote, and perhaps many of you have voted early, so thank you. That's super awesome. We were going to vote today here in New Mexico, but we have 6 inches of snow out the front door, so maybe we'll do that tomorrow. We'll change our plans. But please be safe. Wear a mask. Practice physical distancing, follow the rules, wash your hands, and really stay safe, because we can engage in our public right to vote in a safe manner, especially in this tough time. So again, thank you for being here. And Bob, I'm going to turn it back to you, and you can introduce our incredible lineup of speakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cindy. And as previously mentioned, voting is a right. and a responsibility afforded to all United States citizens. Voting allows citizens the ability to choose leaders who will represent their ideals and decide the future of their communities. And also voting allows you to have a say in the laws that affect your everyday lives. But before voting, and Yanira made this point very clearly, it's important to educate yourself about all the issues, be informed about the candidates, their voting records, and to ask yourself, what direction do you want our country to go in? Many citizens yearn for a more prosperous, just, and equal future for all United States citizens. But to achieve this goal, it's important to be informed and aware of the issues and candidates' stances. There's a lot of misinformation out there, as was pointed out. It's important to rely on reputable, trustworthy sources, and the National Hispanic Council on Aging is one of those. Let us not forget that. So it is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Delegate Ana Sol Gutierrez, who made history as the first Latina to be elected in Maryland, as well as the first Salvadoran American elected to public office in the United States of America in 1990. She was also the first Hispanic state legislature elected to the Maryland House of Delegates in November of 2002. Ms. Gutierrez's passion for education, equity, and social justice, and her extensive experience with public policy at local, state, and national levels has made her an effective, progressive leader in Annapolis and nationwide. She continues to work towards the closing the education achievement gaps for Latino and African American students, to ensure fair, livable wages and paid sick leave for all working women and men, and to protect immigrants' civil and human rights as well as women's rights. Today, she will speak about the importance of voting in the upcoming presidential elections. We welcome you, Delegate Gutierrez.
Thank you very much. I am very happy to be invited to be part of this panel. I'm so excited. I just voted myself. I early voted myself. I had got my sticker, and I was so happy to cast my vote. There was no way that I've been counting the moments, the minutes. We're very sophisticated here in Maryland and Montgomery County, where we have a cam that tells us how long it is to wait. Yesterday, I'm glad to report the lines were so long that I didn't go to vote. I thought I'd wait until the evening, and it just got worse and worse. So more and more people are out voting. I went out this noon, and I was able to stand in line and wait and cast my vote. So that's what I'm hoping is the behavior that is going to be modeled by everybody who has an opportunity to vote for today. I think I'm going to stick to why it is so important to vote, not only for today, the way that you've been told by people who have spoken before me, and by those who are experts in health, particularly in health of the seniors. I really think that this is important, but I want us to raise our head forward and think what it means for the future of this country. This is a very special year. It's 2020. We have had the census, and the census, though it's been tampered with, and thank goodness it's almost through the year, we're going to have the new allocation of state legislators, and there are some states that are going to win representation in Congress, and some states that are going to lose it. But based on the number that the census gives us, based on that, we'll have also redistricting, reallocation of what it means in every state, what are state legislators. I was at the state legislature for 16 years. I'm now retired, and I know how important it is. And your vote is going to propel who the legislators are, what color the legislators who dominates, who has the upper vote. And this is important down the ballot. When you vote, of course it's important to vote for president, but as you go further down, you'll vote, each of us is going to have a choice to vote for a representative at Congress. And though most here in Maryland, most state legislatures are not going to be on the ballot this time around, we will not nonetheless have to draw the maps for redistricting. And so your vote, depending on who your governor is and who your state legislatures is and what the process of redistricting goes like, will be able to stay in place for 10 years. That means that the game that so many politicians have played of manipulating the state legislatures to redistricting in a way that's gerrymandered, that's going to be in their favor. All of that has to be corrected and will be changed. And that's the only way that we have our voice both at the federal level for president and for Congress. As I said, you have those two very important votes coming up to you now, if you haven't voted yet. And as well as the focus on redistricting. And I'm going to focus a little bit more on the state legislature. Because of the pandemic, I'm sure that many of you have seen the difficulty our educational systems have had. Our schools have been closed, and our teachers, thank God, they're being protected in some states, and they are now teaching our students through the computer. But that will end with, I can see that the future will take care of that, and we'll go back to having an educational system. But we must fund it. And that's what the state legislatures and what state and federal government are going to be strong, and why we need your vote. Why we need your vote and now to make sure that we continue with our government as strong as possible to serve our interests and the interests of our community, of our families, and especially of our children. Now, Bob, I'm going to turn it back to you. I think I'm getting some kind of message that I turn it back to you now.
Okay, I appreciate that, Delegate Gutierrez, and thank you for your years of service. They were outstanding in Maryland. Appreciate that. And I want to remind all our attendees that if you have any questions for our presenters, please type them in the chat box, and we will address as many of your questions as possible during our question and answer session. It is a fact that adults over 50 years old deserve to feel safe when casting their vote. However, the coronavirus has changed a large part of our lives, but this is an event that cannot be suspended. On November 3rd, nearly 230 million voters in the United States will be able to vote in what is forecast to be one of the highest voter turnout elections in decades. Many older adults want to vote. However, under this new normal caused by the pandemic, we need to support and protect this population as they vote in the 2020 elections. It's important to highlight that when voting, we need to take all the necessary public health measures to help protect ourselves and others from COVID-19. Our next speaker is Natalie Shortal, who has over 15 years of experience designing, executing, and providing successful strategic counsel to political clients and nonprofits. She currently serves as the advisor for campaigns at AARP, working with 9 state offices, all in the large region, to execute AARP's national and state public advocacy campaigns. Additionally, she works with AARP's multicultural market, increasing awareness of AARP's advocacy work among multicultural audiences nationally and locally. Today, Natalie will highlight voter protections and rights. Welcome, Natalie. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Bob. I'm delighted to spend time with everyone today on a topic that everyone is discussing. My brief presentation will center directly on voter engagement and AARP's voting engagement efforts in this 2020 election cycle. As we know, 2020 is a historic election year, and there is so much at stake. As our nation battles a pandemic, the health and financial security of millions of Americans 50 plus is on the line. AARP has pushed for candidates to talk about that critical issues that matter the most. We are just 7 days from the election, and we want you to be empowered to make your voice heard. Today's voter engagement briefing will cover AARP's Protect Voter 50 Plus campaign, which is a campaign designed for all of us. AARP has a proud 34-year history of nonpartisan voter engagement work, and we continue to provide voters with information on whether the candidates stand on issues important to our members and their families. We are working hard to make sure the 50 plus voter is heard, and AARP wants to help you cast your vote safely and make sure you know all your voting options. To get the latest information about where candidates stand on issues that matter to the 50 plus and how to cast your votes safely from home or in person, you can visit aarp.org/elections2020 in English, or if you prefer in Spanish, it's aarp.org/elecciones2020. It is important to understand the large impact that multicultural voters will have in 2020. This election will mark the first time Latinos represent the largest non-white voting bloc in a presidential cycle. They are projected to increase their vote share from 11% in 2016 to 13% this year. Combined with the eligible voting population of African American voters at 12% and Asian American Pacific Islander voters at 4%, nearly a third of all eligible voters in 2020, if they turned out, are projected to be of multicultural descent. As we move through the presentation, you will see that we do have a lot of work that we're doing that's integrated for multicultural audiences at every level. But I do want to underscore, the fact that there are issues that are important, not just to multicultural audiences, but everybody as Americans. And those issues are, of course, strengthening Social Security, protecting and strengthening Medicare, building a strong and long-term care system, lowering the cost of prescription drugs, and secure the economy and health of the 50 plus Americans in the country. The next slide will show you some information as to where you can find more details. This year, we have made sure that we have election pages for each of our states, so people can go to the state pages and find information that is directing them directly to their Secretary of State office or local elected officials in their counties or cities. And this information, of course, can be found in both English and Spanish. On our voter guide pages that are in both English and in Spanish. So with that, I just want to say a thank you for everyone. This is a robust campaign where your participation is not only wanted, but it is essential. Our founder, Dr. Andrews, believed in the importance of Election Day and our civic duty to make decisions based on our desire of how we want the country to be guided and what we want our country to achieve. Let's do all that we can to make sure our members and the 50 plus have access to the voting process. And with that, Bob, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much, Natalie. And let me just add, as a AARP board member, I'm proud of the work we're doing on protecting the 50 plus voters. And let me just add that, you gave a statistic about the growth of the multicultural population in this voting, in the voting population. So too are older voters growing in numbers. They went from 16% of the population, voting population in 2006 to 23% in 2020. So these are two important constituencies that we need to make sure turn out to vote. I want to remind all of our attendees that if you have any questions for our presenters, please type them in the chat box and we will address as many of your questions as possible during our question and answer session. Political decisions have a direct influence on the quality of life, the economy, access to basic rights such as healthcare and housing, and in general on the progress and constitutional order within a community. In the midst of a social crisis in the country, our focus of attention is on ensuring our communities know and understand the different proposals of the candidates regarding issues such as immigration, corruption, social justice, racial equity, etc. And in this way, obtain sufficient details to consciously decide who to vote for. Our next speaker is Mr. Oscar Ramirez, the co-founder and partner at Fulcrum Public Affairs, the only 100% Black and Latinx-owned government relations firm in Washington, D.C. Since its founding in early 2019, Oscar and his co-founder, Dana Thompson, have built a $3+ million advocacy firm representing Fortune 100 companies, trade associations, innovative startups, and mission-driven nonprofits. Oscar will talk today about why elections are paramount, and we welcome you to our webinar, Oscar.
Thank you so much, Bob. It's a pleasure to join my fellow panelists. And let me give a little acknowledgement to Delegate Ana Sol Gutierrez. One of the first things I did in politics, I think it was back in 2002, was to knock on doors for Ana Sol when she was running for delegate in Maryland. I think that was your first election, Ana Sol. So it's a privilege to be here with all of you this afternoon. So I'm gonna start off by giving a little bit of a political lay of the land. And let me start off by addressing some of the issues regarding polling. So despite what you're seeing in the polls, and we saw a little bit of this in 2016, this is actually a really close race, a close election. First, national polls tell us very little about getting to 270 electoral votes. It's the states that decide the election. And there, it's essentially a toss-up. Florida, the margin is 1.2 points. North Carolina, the margin is 1.2 points. Arizona, the margin is 2.2 points. Pennsylvania, the margin is 4.5 points. So it's very, very close when you're talking about getting the 270 electoral votes you need to become president. Second, we also know that even the best polling can be wrong, and that it's voter turnout that decides the elections. We learned that, as I mentioned, in 2016. Polls don't decide elections, voters do. And lastly, the margin of victory is critical if we want to have a decision that impacts people's lives and Latino communities' lives. For example, if Joe Biden wins by 1% and Democrats do not take back the Senate, many of the things that the progressive community wants to pass and enact into law will be very difficult to happen because there will not be a Democratic Senate, for example. If Biden wins by a larger margin, and there is 52, 53 seats, there are 52, 53 seats in the Senate that are Democratic, then there's a stronger mandate to pass some progressive policy initiatives that are supported by the majority of the Latino community. So it's not just about whether one side wins or the other, it's also about the margin. So that's why it's important that you vote. In terms of the Latino vote, Latinos themselves can decide this election. As some of you may know, a record 32 million Latinos are projected to be eligible to vote this cycle. And our community is concentrated in key battleground states. This election marks the first time that Latinos will be the largest racial and ethnic minority group in the electorate, about 13% of eligible voters. Equally as importantly, Latinos are sizable voting blocks in key states like Arizona, Colorado, Florida, Nevada, and Texas, but also in states that were very important in 2016, like Michigan, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. The Latino vote can swing the election in those states. In 2016, there were 6 states carried by Republicans, including Arizona, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And if you look at the estimated population of newly eligible Latino voters, so new Latino voters between 2016 and 2020, that number will be greater than Donald Trump's margin of victory in 2016 in those states, Arizona, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And in Michigan, a state that Donald Trump carried by just over 10,000 votes, there are more than 46,000 Latinos who gained eligibility between 2016 and 2020. So again, Latinos will decide the election in those key states, not just those Latino states. The other thing I want to talk about is some of the issues that I know are important to our community and some of the choices that we have in exactly 7 days. So the first thing I want to talk about very briefly is the COVID response. So separate from the political landscape, it's important for us to think about the issues that disproportionately impact our community. Overall, as anybody who's turned on the TV knows, there are over 200,000 people who've died in the US alone because of COVID. That means that there's right now a new 9/11 every 3 days. The Latino community in particular has been hit hard by COVID. Almost 50,000 Latinos in the US have died. So about almost one quarter of the total death toll. And 21% of COVID deaths, as I mentioned, are Latino. We are only 18% of the population. So again, we over-index on deaths to COVID. Latinos are also 3 times more likely to be infected by COVID than others. And Latinos are dying at twice the rate of whites when it comes to COVID. The impact of COVID on our community also impacts our pocketbooks. More than 3 million Latinos are unemployed today than were before. And 4 in 10 Latino families with children are going hungry. And 1 in 3 Latino small businesses has taken an economic hit due to COVID. That's why there was a legislation that was passed this summer, early this summer in Congress, that would do things like extend unemployment insurance, send families another direct stimulus check, allow you to keep your health care, create loans for Latino-owned small businesses. That's what's on the ballot next week. If we want to support those provisions, you need to vote. So the election next week is a choice between more of what we have been doing and we want to do more than what we have been doing and more of the same. Another issue I want to briefly talk about is healthcare. Latinos gained the most access to healthcare under the Affordable Care Act that President Obama passed about a decade ago. The ACA expanded access to healthcare for more than 20 million Americans and protected more than 100 million Americans with pre-existing conditions. So under the ACA, if you have a pre-existing condition, if you have diabetes, if you have asthma, like I do, if you have high blood pressure, insurance companies cannot turn you away. They cannot raise your rates. And right now, as some of you have seen probably in the news last week or so, the Trump administration is trying to take down Obamacare. And the Supreme Court vote that we had yesterday will make that easier to happen in the next few months and even into early next year. So that, again, that's what's on the ballot. I'll contrast that with the other candidate who is offering to create a public plan like Medicare that anyone can buy into. So we do have, without getting into too much detail into these issues, we do have a choice in terms of the direction on healthcare that the 2 candidates want to go in. The next thing I want to talk about, again, very briefly, is the economy. I think about 3 or 4 days ago, Moody's Analytics, which is a nonpartisan economic research firm, published an economic forecast that weighs the impact of Joe Biden and Donald Trump's economic proposals. And it found that Biden's plan would produce dramatically faster job growth and higher wages for most workers. So for Moody's, a Biden presidency would mean lower unemployment, 7.5 million more jobs, $1 trillion in additional growth through 2024 than if Trump was reelected. And that's important because over the last 4 years, we have seen 8 million more Americans living in poverty and almost 3 in 4 Latino households reporting serious financial hardships because of this administration's failure to respond to COVID effectively. And again, on the other side, you have Biden, who said who's committed to raising the minimum wage of $15 an hour, make historic investments in clean energy that would create a lot of clean energy jobs, provide 2 years of community college or job training debt-free for Latinos. So again, we have a choice on the economy as well as we head into next week. And the last thing I'll mention is something that I know is one of the issues that a lot of Latinos vote on and a lot of Latinos kind of see as a gateway issue. And if a candidate, whether it's a Democrat or Republican member, is not right on this issue, they often will look at other issues, other positions they hold. And that is immigration. So the 3 things I'll say about immigration is, 1, on family separation, which I'm sure everyone on this webinar is aware of, there are 545 children who are still separated from their parents as a result of Trump's family separation policy. And so if we want to end those asylum policies, if we want to end family separation, and we want to end detention centers for children, you need to vote. The second thing I would say is on DACA, that we saw this administration kill the DACA program, which President Obama instituted. He just shut it down. Democrats sued to keep it alive, and by a 5-4 vote, the Supreme Court barely kept that alive. Again, yesterday we just had a Supreme Court justice confirmed So there is the risk that that 5-4 vote that went in our direction could go 5-4 against us in a different direction in next year. And the last thing I'll talk about is very broadly what people often call comprehensive immigration reform, CIR. In the first 100 days, if we look at press reports, Vice President Biden has said he'll send a bill to Congress that will create a roadmap to citizenship for 11 million undocumented Americans. And his immigration plan prioritizes family unification and diversity as the cornerstones of the system. So again, different perspectives, different views on immigration between both of the candidates. So whether it's COVID, access to healthcare, the economy, immigration, what happens in 1 week is going to impact all our lives and the lives of people that we know. So whichever candidate you decide to vote for, please go vote and make sure that everyone. I used to be a campaign organizer, so Nana Sol will do this too. So make sure that not just that you vote, but that everyone that you know votes as well, and that's how we will have the best impact for our community. So with that, I will turn it back over to Bob.
Oscar, thank you very much. Your point is well taken. As we said in your introduction, this is about understanding the different proposals of candidates on issues. Whether you have a favorite issue or you have several issues, you should understand when you walk into the voting place or when you cast your ballot early, you're voting for the reason, the position, the future that candidate lays out for you. And the very fact that you get motivated by a position should be the reason that you vote, and that's what we will encourage you to do. So we're now going to go to our question and answer session. I see we have a few in the queue. I don't see. I guess Christine, you're going to take that part because I don't see the questions that well here. Let me see. Let me see if I do this. Hold on 1 second. All right. I think our first question. I can see it now. Okay. Okay. Let's see. First one appears to be a Maryland question. Can anyone who is registered to vote do early voting in Maryland? I'm not sure if this is the delegate or Oscar could answer this question.
I will let Anna Sol answer that question. I no longer live in Maryland, so I'm not as familiar as I used to be on what's happening there.
Anna Sol, are you still with us, Anna Sol? I don't see her. Why don't we try to get that information and post it on the website? And
here I am. I am muted. They knew my predilection for speaking, so they muted me.
Oh, well, I'm
yes.
glad you came back. Thank you.
In Maryland, we work hard at the state level. You know that voting rules are different from state to state, and that's why some state legislatures, which are the bad legislatures, have made it very difficult to vote. Here in Maryland, we made it so easy to vote by establishing early voting. That means that rather than just wait for November 3rd, you have a week to 10 days ahead to vote. And we've increased the voting centers. We now have close to 13 early voting centers. You can go on our State Board of Elections website and put in your address, and that'll tell you where your early voting center is. And also what we've been able to do, though we won't have voting at your polling sites, which is your nearest school, we do have all our high schools are voting centers. So on November 3rd, you'll be able to vote there. But more excited, and this took a lot of lifting. We had to pass a constitutional amendment. We allowed for registration to take place both during the day of the election, November 3rd, plus all the time of early voting. You can register to vote. If you're a good Latino and you leave things to last and you missed that early registration period, we have opened it up so that you can change your address and you can change your name and you can register to vote, both during the early voting period and during the actual voting. There is a space there for you to vote. So there's no excuse. I'm sorry. There's no excuse. You live in Maryland. If you're a citizen, you are going to vote. And we want your vote because it counts so much in this election. We want to make sure that everybody votes. I'll mute myself again.
Thank you. Don't go too far, though. You never know. We might need you back, Anna Sol. Thank you.
I won't unmute myself.
The next question is, how can I motivate others that don't want to vote to actually vote? I'm going to take the first crack at this one, actually. I can't imagine a time period or election where people have a hard time being motivated to vote. With all that is going on, with all the distinctions between the candidates, it's very difficult to imagine that. But if there is still that issue, let me go back to what I said in the beginning of my comments. From today's New York Times, people who decide not to vote have as big an impact on elections as people who cast ballots, especially in close races. I gave a couple of state examples. Let me give two more that came from the same article. In the state of Florida, 5,181,000 people did not vote who were eligible, and the margin of victory for President Trump was 112,000 votes. In the state of New Hampshire, where there were 300,000 eligible non-voters, the margin of victory for Secretary Clinton was 2,736 votes. That in of itself should be a motivating factor to encourage people to vote. Who else would like to comment on that question?
Well, I'm going to jump in there just with a simple urging everybody to not even think 1 minute that your vote doesn't count. Your vote counts enormously. It can make the difference. There are positions and races that have been won or lost by 1 or 2 votes. And I think, Bob, your example of the states, especially the swing states, and the difference that the people who decided not to vote, who didn't care, or who decided that their vote didn't count and stayed home, how much of a difference that has made, and how much the last 4 years have made to so many. And what a burden we have before us to put this country back together, to make us the leader of the world and to make us the leader of the Democratic Party. So your vote is going to make the difference, no matter where you live.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is Oscar.
Oscar, you got something you want to say?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is to kind of piggyback on what Dr. Cruz said at the very beginning is, really go to your trusted sources if you're not sure how to vote, right? As Anna Sol said, you need to vote to have an impact in selection. And as Bob said, if you don't know how to vote, go to the Trump campaign website, go to the Biden campaign website, see what they are saying about the issues that are important to you. But go to the National Hispanic Council on Aging, go to AARP, go to other organizations, that work on Latino issues or small business issues, whatever is important to you, and talk to them and have them give you information about both candidates, and that's so you can make an informed decision.
Thank you. Natalie, anything you want to add?
Yes, definitely. And thank you, Oscar, for mentioning the AARP page. I mean, one thing that is important, is those issues that are affecting, we say the 50+, but it affects everyone, right? Now, with so many Americans struggling to afford healthcare and other basic needs, Social Security is even more important than before. Protecting and strengthening Medicare. Medicare is more crucial than ever as American faces the 1-2 punch of the coronavirus health and economic consequences. Also, building those long-term care systems. The coronavirus pandemic has left a devastating impact on families. I mean, nursing homes, the toll that it's taken on the number of deaths. Of course, as always, lowering prescription drug prices. That is important. And securing the economy of Americans 50+. There's a lot of unemployment during the coronavirus crisis right now. So we want to make sure that those that we are voting for and get that information out. Like Oscar said, educate yourself on where those candidates stand on these issues that are important to all of us.
Thank you all for your comments. And even though this seems to suggest private. I think this is an important enough question that I want to get out for the panelists to answer as well as myself, which is, if I go to vote in person, how do I know I'm safe amid COVID-19? Is it safe to vote in person? Well, my suggestion is twofold in nature. One is determine ahead of time by checking with your local jurisdiction what protections they will have in place in your polling area, with the place that you normally would go to vote if you go to vote in person. But if you have any doubt in your mind about it, then vote early. There are many opportunities to vote early in every state. You should not be in fear of voting because of that concern. I'm confident that they're taking necessary precautions in polling areas, but if there's any doubt, just exercise your right to vote early, and it's all important about voting. Who else wants to add anything on that question?
Just let me tell you a little bit about sharing my experience. I'm 78 years old. I'm also quite concerned about the corona, the pandemic that we live in, and I've been sitting at home by myself. So I was afraid to go out, but that's why I think the helpful reminders, and I'm sure many other states have it, as to how long a wait do you have. You don't want to wait when there are long lines. You don't want to go when there are long lines, and you don't want to be, you usually stand in line and the outside, so it's better. But once it's inside, you really want to be protected. You're not going to be allowed if you don't have a mask. They have masks there to give you at the door. Because we want to make sure that everybody votes. But wear your mask and wear the most safest mask that you have, that covers your nose and your mouth completely. And then you have to have social distancing. We have our voting site, one of our centers, we have a great big gymnasium that allowed the social distancing. I think more than anything, the mask and the social distancing are what will protect all of us. And then, as was mentioned there, don't wait to go in the evening when it's crowded. Go early. Don't go first thing in the morning, because there's usually a line there, but around 10, 11, noon, before the lunch hour, there was hardly any line or no line at all. So be informed and go during early voting. I think most states, especially in the East Coast, have the early voting. And I would also, if you just have it only on November 3rd, then also make a plan to go with somebody and to go early on, so you don't run out of time and you don't run out of the opportunity to vote in this most important of all elections.
Thank you, Anna Sol. Very good. Well, Oscar?
Yeah, this is Oscar. Yeah, the only thing I would add, I think Anna Sol is completely right. The mask and social distancing are the most important things. But the other thing I think is good news is, because so many people are voting early this cycle because of the fear of COVID, in some places around the country, as many people have voted early already as voted all of the 2016 cycle. So I think the results of that on election days, you're going to see much smaller lines, less crowded voting locations, polling locations. So, more people are voting, but they'll be distributed over 1 or 2 weeks, depending how long the early voting period is in your state. But it should not be on election day as crowded as it might have been 8 years ago, for example. So just go out and vote.
Right. Natalie?
No, the only thing I would add, and I think Representative Gutierrez covered it really well, is, part of the long lines is you make sure you do educate yourself, find out information and what is available for people with disabilities as well as seniors. Normally, you don't have to stand in line. I know North Carolina, for example, has curbside voting, what they're calling, that you can, if you're a senior or a person with disabilities. So, just do learn of what is out there and the options that may be available to avoid standing in a long line.
Great. The next question is sort of related. Is it better to vote early or on election day? Well, my first response to that is check the weather forecast. You have 7-day forecasts that are out there. If you have any concern about, it being inclement weather, then vote early. But if everything else seems to be in order, and as Oscar pointed out, the likelihood of there being less congestion at the polling site, then wait till election day. But the most important thing is just make sure you vote. Anybody else with a thought on that question?
Bob, this is Natalie. Yeah, I mean, whether you vote from home or vote the day of the election, the most important thing to do is that you vote safely and take care of your health. So the option is there, and either way, it's okay.
Yes, I just want to encourage everybody to vote and to take advantage of the early voting, because early voting does give you your choice of when to go. And if you plan to go, you can look at the weather, as Bob has excellent his recommendation. Well, if you wait till November 3rd, that is the only day. Whether it rains, it pours, or if it's okay, sunny, then that's the only day that you have to vote. And after that, that's it. I'm really thankful for those who did the mail-in voting. They really have made this a much safer election. I decided to go early, to vote early. Not only was it available, but I didn't want any trouble with the mail. And we've seen the Supreme Court decisions where in Pennsylvania, if the vote does not arrive before the 3rd by mail, then it can't be counted. I wanted to be sure that I was counted. So that's what made me stay in line to this morning. And I'm glad I'm done with it. I voted.
Very good.
And the only thing I would add to that is that in some states, I think Florida is probably the best example, is that we talked about earlier when we'll know what the election results are. In Florida, people who vote early, those are the first votes that are counted. So at 8 p.m., I think is when their polling places close. At 8 p.m., you'll see a bunch of votes show up on your TV screens on these different channels, and those will be the early votes. So if you want to have a disproportionate impact on what people are seeing or how they think the election results go, in some states, vote early, and your vote will show up on election night instead of maybe a couple of days after that.
Very good point. Very good point. The next question actually concerns me a little bit, which I think would concern everybody. The question being, what should I do if someone tries to stop me from voting? Well, let me offer a couple of quick thoughts on that. One is, and I think Anna Sol made this point earlier, don't go by yourself. Go with someone. Okay. If you're going to go in person to do voting. Okay. It's easy. It's more difficult to try to stop two people from a voting situation. But more importantly, because of the concerns that have been raised, I fully expect that there will be law enforcement presence in many voting sites in this country, and you should know that going in. Look around before you go in to vote and see who's there that might be from law enforcement that can escort you in if necessary. But we don't want to see that happen. But be smart in the process and take necessary steps to avoid that situation from happening. Anyone else?
Just one little bit of advice is absolutely go with somebody, but there'll be somebody around. There's lots of judges and personnel that are at the polling site, and use your voice, scream. That's what we tell young kids when they're in danger, to scream bloody murder if anybody tries to prevent you from voting. And then if they try to do it by phone, or if they try to come to your house, then ignore that appeal, a last minute appeal to have you not go to vote.
Thank you.
Yeah, and in addition to the polling volunteers who are there, many locations often have representatives from campaigns who are there to help out. So if you're there to vote for Donald Trump and you are prevented from voting, there may be in your polling location a voter protection person. If you are voting for Joe Biden and somebody's preventing you from voting, there may be a voter protection person there who will help out. I know on the Biden side, they will have the largest voter protection team on the ground ever in history. And I've done some of that work previously in other campaigns. So there will be people there who will be looking out for you. So as Ana Sol said, whether it's people who are working there, who are part of the local infrastructure, or people from the campaigns, definitely look for them.
And I forgot to tell you that there are people, lawyers especially, that are active both at the national level and at the state level. Do complain if by any chance you saw something, you heard something. You do tell the persons at the poll and ask for the number where you can report it, because there are committees that are there to protect you, to protect your vote, and that will make sure that they'll take it up the ladder as high as possible to make any illegality known to. Is going to be very, very important for you to not keep quiet about it. So
That's right.
Be responsible.
Right. Yeah, it goes with that old saying, if you see something, say something. And that's what you have to do in this situation too. And the other thing too is, go to your local Board of Elections site beforehand and find out exactly what they're planning to do per voting location in your area. I don't see any more questions at the moment. I want to ask Dr. Cruz or Cindy Padilla if they have questions of their own for the panelists.
Hi, Bob. Thank you for that question. And that was a question in terms of what I had asked earlier, and I appreciated your answers, but I think I want to ask it for the audience is, I know we hear a lot of now about, election results and not knowing or knowing. I wonder, do you all have any informed information about, how soon do you think we will know the results of this election?
I can give you my opinion. I definitely don't think it'll be by November 3rd, that evening. There are too many states that have mail-in ballots and that are prohibited to start counting until after November 3rd, that we won't have their final number. I think we'll be able to know the tendency, and perhaps the media can look at the Electoral College vote, which is what is determinative here, and give us an idea. But I think each state has in its constitution how many more days after the national day of voting they have by law to finalize the results, the absentee ballots, as well as the ballots counted that evening. But that's why it's important to vote in the early voting and to the voting session, is that those ballots are counted right away. And so we'll see what the tendency is from every state in the nation.
Anyone else? I will offer one thought. This may be a little pie in the sky optimism, but it's my personal view. I happen to think that the margin of victory that the vice president may capture may be sufficient to prevent unnecessary delays. If he captures the necessary electoral votes that make it indisputable that he won, I think that'll shorten the time period quite a bit, and there is that possibility. But that's just my opinion.
Your voice is my prayers. And I'm really as optimistic as you that the margin of victory will be sufficient, especially in the Electoral College, where we'll know that there's no path to victory by the second place winner.
Oscar or Natalie, any thoughts on that question?
I do not.
Okay.
Nope.
All right. I see another question that's come in. How do I report voter? Oh, wait a minute. Hang on a second. There's two questions. I missed one here. It says, what if I need help translating the voting information at my polling place?
Okay, I'll jump in with that. Depending on what state you're in, the Voting Rights Act protects you in that information and people who are bilingual are supposed to be there to help you at the polling place. Most ballots here in Montgomery County by law are both in English and in Spanish, as there are sufficient Spanish speakers for the law to kick in. Ask the chief judge that for help. They have access and they contracted with the phone services that do translations in no matter what language. So the fact that your language is impediment for you, don't let that happen. They're there to help you, and we know that it's your civil right, your human right to be able to vote, even though your English is not perfect. So make sure you always ask for help. That's the best advice I can give you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Fatima, I'm going to ask you, could I make this into one question? That looks like it could be. Question being, how do I report voter suppression and what type of help can we expect?
Yeah,
Well,
that might have been answered a little bit in the earlier question, but Oscar, go ahead, please.
Yeah, no, there is, and I'm not affiliated with them, so but I'm aware of them. There is a national nonpartisan election protection coalition that includes organizations like the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, NALEO, some Asian American groups, Arab American groups that have an election protection network. And they have a hotline number. It's 866-OUR-VOTE, 866-687-8683. So if you go to their website, which is 866-OurVote.org, they will have a lot of information about voter protection in advance, where you can go state by state and get information about how to vote, any requirements you need to vote. So it's a coalition of a variety of groups, some Latino groups that have very good information out there. So again, 866-OurVote.org is the website, and 866-OUR-VOTE is the phone number.
Thank you for that information. Very helpful. Anybody else on that question?
I think we answered it before, that if you look into your own state website, they should have a number on which to call if there's any difficulty.
Right. Thank you for that. I think while we wait for other questions, I may now want to introduce Mr. Felipe Benitez, the Executive Director of Corazon Latino. Mr. Benitez has more than 15 years of experience designing and implementing strategic communication programs to enhance and protect the reputations of organizations, governments, companies, and brands. And we now be delighted to recognize you. Felipe, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Bob, and thank you everybody for attending this important conversation, for the speakers that went before me, for NHCOA for putting it together, to Yanira and everybody on the team. I am speaking to you I'm right now in Washington, D.C., and I want to recognize and pay homage to the lands of the Anacostans, the ancestral lands of the Anacostans. We are here doing our work, fighting for our community from their lands. And Corazon Latino is an organization that seeks to empower, to reconnect Latino communities with nature. And we say that it's reconnect because we all, as Latinos, as immigrants, either it's us or our ancestors immigrated, we all have that connection, that passion, that knowledge about protecting and caring for our Madre Tierra or Pachamama or our motherland, however you want to call it. We believe that there's a reciprocity there. You get a lot from nature, but you also need to protect nature. And in this occasion, we're asking you to protect nature by the power, by using the power of our vote. The same way we protect nature, it's gonna protect us. And I'm saying this because Mother Nature is screaming at us. It's demanding us to pay attention to what's happening. Latino communities, whether it's in Puerto Rico, Arizona, Texas, California, they're suffering from the consequences of climate change, whether it's fires, it's droughts, it's hurricanes, you name it. We also have an exacerbated effect or effects of COVID-19, which, by the way, are also being caused by pollution. You know that Latino kids and Latino adults are much more likely to fall ill and even die because of COVID, because of a lot of illnesses, a lot of issues that we have that happen in our community. And that's because there's decision makers, there's government officials that prefer to side on the side of polluters, on money making, on greed, rather than protecting our families. So that's why it's very important, I call you, to really think and exercise that right, that privilege that you have, because you're not voting only for yourself, you're voting for your family. You're voting for those DACA recipients, for those immigrants that cannot vote. You're voting for our Madre Tierra. Pay homage to our ancestors, to our immigrant roots by exercising that right to vote. And I say this because I know it's hard, and it has been mentioned today, all the difficulties being exposed to COVID, weather. I mean, there's many ways, and it's a Tuesday, if we're working, I mean, there's many ways that we can find an excuse to not vote, to not exercise that right. But think about it as a moral imperative. Right now, as I mentioned, Mother Earth is demanding our attention, is demanding actions. But also, it was mentioned earlier today about kids in cages, family separations. There was a report a few days ago that 545 kids have not been located. That have been separated with their parents. They simply lost their parents, lost connection. Just imagine that. This is our kids. This is our babies. 545 families right now do not have the opportunity to hug their loved ones. You have the power to change that. You have the power to make things right. And I'm not saying that this is a Republican or a Democrat or a Trump problem. Obviously, the current administration has exacerbated this issue, but we've had a broken immigration system for decades. We need to fix it. We need to make sure that the people who are representing us in Washington take it seriously. And the only way that they're gonna listen is by the power of our vote. So again, this is a moment that in 15 years, whether we're still in this planet or in this land or not, our future generations are gonna look into us and ask us, what did you do? It was a moment of profound change that could happen. What did you do? Did you stay home? Did you just wear this thinking that others will make a decision that it's not worth it, that my vote's not gonna count? Or you're gonna do everything you can to make sure that your voice is heard, that the voice of our communities, that the voice of our of those most vulnerable, of those kids, of those older adults that cannot vote, it's heard. So please do it. Please take this opportunity. Do it safely. Have a plan. Vote early, but vote. And if you cannot vote, find somebody that can. Find your neighbor, find your family member, find whoever, and make sure that they have this conversation. Remember that we as Latinos, we make these decisions as a family. We make these decisions at the dinner table. Make sure that you have those conversations. Y simplemente en español, para quienes nos escuchan, este es el momento. Es un momento histórico y nuestro voto nos puede ayudar a defender a nuestra comunidad, a nuestros hijos y a esos 545 niños, bebés que están separados de sus familias. También nos va a ayudar a proteger a nuestra madre tierra. Así que, por favor, honren a sus ancestros, honren nuestra tradición inmigrante al ejercer el derecho al voto. Que Dios me los bendiga a todos. Thank you very much, Bob.
Felipe, thank you very much for very passionate remarks and very effective and important remarks. I am looking for more questions. I don't see any per se. I would like to, before I move to close this webinar, I want to make sure that Dr. Cruz, if you have any closing comments you'd like to make for us. And I also want to thank our sponsors. I neglected to do that on the way in, which is a big mistake. Verizon, AbbVie, the Pfizer Foundation, Pharma, AARP, Lyft, Nutrition for Zero Hunger, and Lilly. We cannot conduct these webinars and forums without this support, and we are very grateful for the support, ongoing support of many of these sponsors. So Dr. Cruz, is there anything you would like to say at the conclusion of the webinar here?
Thank you, Bob. I just want to say thank you to everyone for being here, all the participants, as well as the team, the NHCOA team, for putting together the event, and also to all the speakers for that wonderful, wonderful information, and important and timely. Know that we have recorded the information, and we will disseminate the webinar via social media. So the idea is to get this information out. Is important that we share the information that we gather from today's event with family and friends. Let's not keep it to ourselves. Let's get let's commit to engaging our circle of family and friends with this important information. And with that, take care, and thanks to everyone again.
Thank you very much. And the chair, Cindy Padilla, anything you want to close with before I formally close the thing?
Yeah, thank you, Bob. Yeah, I just would like to echo Dr. Cruz's appreciation to our NHCOA staff. I know that I've been at so many events, and we've put together, many webinars and information sessions, and it really is about getting the word out and involving people. And we couldn't do it without all of our, our staff and our teams working to pull these together. And thank you to all of our speakers for, again, all of the incredible information. And, I appreciated our comments. As Latinos, we do vote. It's a family affair. We talk about it at the dinner table. We talk about it with our cousins. We talk about text message. Who are you voting? When are you going? And I think it's just critically important that we encourage each other, to vote. And there was a question earlier on, how do we convince people who say, my vote doesn't matter? I get them to vote. And it is about family and friends. And, if we're not the ones that can convince them, maybe there's a family friend or a family member that that, they listen to, or you talk to them to talk to the individual who, doesn't want to get involved. So, we have ways, we have circles, and we need to use them in getting that information. And so thank you all to our participants. Bob, thank you for hosting and moderating this important session. And again, is just bottom line is get out the vote. And we have 7 more days, and I hope that we can mobilize countless more people in those next 7 days. So thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Cindy. And so let me thank Anna Sol, Natalie, Oscar, Felipe for their expert comments. And again, I'm going to say a second time, I want to say thank you to Pharma, AbbVie, Lyft, Verizon, Amgen, Pfizer Foundation, Herbalife Nutrition, and Lilly are the generous sponsors of this fine webinar. And I also echo the comments of Dr. Cruz about Fatima and Christine for their great help on this webinar. And remember, just one vote, your vote, can make a huge difference in improving the quality of life for everyone in the United States and ensure dignity in aging. The National Hispanic Council on Aging invites and encourages every eligible voter to vote. If you have not already done so, to research the candidates and laws that these candidates will be asked to vote on. Vote and let your voice be heard on Election Day, November 3rd, 2020. And with that, we say thank you, and we are signing off.